Well, good to see you all. A few friends out there, a few old friends, including my old boss from Rio Tinto. Eric, good to see you. Who am I talking about again? Vizsla Copper. Right, there's a few Vizslas getting about, and hopefully you've seen Vizsla Silver if you haven't seen the team there. We're about to build, I think, what will be the fourth biggest silver mine in the world. So, and we just spun a royalty company out of that business, and that's all going along very, very well. So make sure you talk to the guys. When we started Vizsla Resources 5 years ago, we're trying to put our foot on as much copper as we could. We found it pretty bloody hard to do. You know, we've kicked the tyres over the last 5 years on probably 500 copper opportunities around the world. And what we found is that there ain't much out there. The cupboard's pretty bloody bare. And what we did do, though, and what we found was that in British Columbia, you have some of the world's great porphyry systems. It's a great place to operate, big porphyry systems. We get a bit of a bad rap for having low grade, 0.4, 0.5% copper. We think that's rubbish. They've just been looked at the wrong way. So we're revisiting all of that. And the reason we want to do that is because we've got a view that copper is going to be the place to invest over the next 5 to 10 years. Silver, any metal, any precious metal or any battery metal, as they call them, any strategic metal is the place to be. But certainly copper. You know, we're supply-side tragics, given we're in the mining business, of course, but we don't have great visibility on the demand side. But if you listen to our mates at Rio Tinto, BHP, Trafigura, you know that the demand side's looking after itself, growing dramatically, and there's a huge supply gap coming up. I think, you know, BHP's forecast is we need 35 million tonnes per annum of copper by the back end of this decade. If you go back to when I joined Eric at Rio Tinto in 1999, 2000, the copper price was 71 cents, and we had to put it into our models at a cent diminishing year into infinity. Over the next 10 years, the copper price, of course, for a single point reason, being the urbanisation of the Chinese populace, was enough to drive the copper price up 6 times over the next 8 years, all the way from 71 cents to $4.60. So that's one demand driver. This time around, we've got the confluence of 3 major demand drivers, possibly the biggest demand drivers we've ever seen: the electrification of the planet, the move to EVs, all of that. The shock supply side, demand side driver has been the data centre demand in the US. So if we go back to March, you know, Panamax vessels were sailing from Chile. You saw a massive jump in the spot price out of New York, and Panamax vessels, instead of continuing their journey, turned and went back to LA and dropped that copper back in Los Angeles because of these data centres that are coming up. And I thought, well, that's very, very interesting. Why is that happening? What sort of demand are we going to see from these data centres? And what I've found out is that if you do a ChatGPT search on your phone, it uses 10 times the electricity as a Google search. So that's not going away. You know, Zuckerberg's out there now talking about we need to build SMR reactors at these data centres. So that's growing. So that's the second leg of that. And the very interesting thing for me, and we've been predicting this for 20 years and getting it consistently wrong, is that Indian demand is finally starting to take off. And it looks like that sort of urbanisation process, electrification process, is about to happen writ large in India. So you've got the confluence of all of these things. The demand side's about to take off. And we're about to see the exact same supply-demand imbalance that we saw from 2000 to 2007 emerge. And that was a 30% change in supply-demand fundamentals, was enough to drive the copper price up 6 times to $4.60. This time around, we're starting at about a low base of $4.10. We saw, thanks to that US demand earlier in the year, the copper price jumped to $5.10, an all-time high, but we're trading around $4.10 today. If you extrapolate the past performance of the copper price in relation to a 30% jump in demand, which we see coming, it's not too hard to see $20 to $30 per pound copper. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. We're trying to put our foot on as much copper as we can. And what happens when you get a market like that? The returns can be absolutely extraordinary. A favourite of mine, Oxiana, a business partner with Owen Hegarty. We're still partners in EMR Capital. You look at that chart, EMR went up 1,000 times from 2000 to 2008-9. So extraordinary jump. You can make extraordinary fortunes in this broad, deep market that is the copper market. So I think this is where you want to be. So whilst we've got some great silver, gold, uranium projects, I have a personal love for copper, and I think that there's not much love in the market for copper juniors. Watch this space, that'll change pretty damn quickly. We've got a good team here at Invented Capital and the Vizslas. You see some of the success stories we've been involved in. I was a co-founder of NextGen Energy, the founder of ISO Energy, both billion-dollar-plus companies today. Vizsla Silver, $600 million company, well on its way to a multi-billion-dollar company. I think if you look at Vizsla Silver's PEA and put in the spot prices, we're talking about a $2.3 billion NPV at the moment. We put up Senko there. My friend Simon Smirlik, we had the great fortune of having Simon join us at Inventor Group and Vizsla Silver earlier in the year, and we sort of differentiate ourselves from many of the groups here in Canada in that we're never sellers. We want to build the projects ourselves. Vizsla Silver is a modest project in terms of scale and very easy to operate, so we've got the team to do that. Skeena Resources, of course, I've been the chairman of there for the past 7 years. So lots going on there, but we've got fantastic people. I think my companies have raised over $1.1 billion in the past 14 years, so we've got good access to capital and I think reasonably well respected in the market, as long as we don't have a bad night here tonight. You see what's happening in British Columbia at present. As I say, BC's had a bit of a bad rap for porphyries and everyone thinks they're low grade. Well, I can tell you they're not, and those guys up there on screen know they're not. We've seen major investments from the majors into junior companies in recent times, and interestingly enough, our mates at Fortescue, who we've been talking to a little bit, went and staked a huge swathe of ground to the west of our Woodjam project, 300 kilometres north to south by about 50 kilometres east to west. So they're convinced that BC is a great place to operate and has tremendous prospectivity. Just quickly, our projects. We've got 4 key projects. The 2 that I'd like you to focus on are the Woodjam and Poplar projects. We bought Woodjam in an acquisition of Woodjam Consolidated back in 2 years ago. We paid a princely sum of $11 million for about 2 billion pounds of copper and 1 million ounces of gold. We figure you can't go wrong paying that sort of price for that much metal in the ground. And then we had recently announced back in March the acquisition of the Poplar copper project through the acquisition of Universal Copper. For even less money, that gave us 2 billion pounds of copper in the ground at about 0.4% copper, and we paid $2.7 million for that company. So very, very cheap acquisition. I think that will be one of the all-time great steals in the next as the next cycle takes off, and all in fantastic locations. On the Woodjam project, just quickly, we sit 10 kilometres, the property boundary sits 10 kilometres south of the Mount Polly mine, fantastic mine nowadays, run by Imperial Copper. We're 45 kilometres to the east of Williams Lake, the regional centre. There's a major highway crisscrosses the property. There's logging roads. Importantly, grid power to the property and across the property. But the really interesting thing on this map, when I worked for Eric, he moved me to Chile, and I cut my teeth as a young geologist, porphyry geologist in Chile. I've never, in 25 years of exploring for porphyries, seen anything quite like this. So if you look at those black dots in the centre of that map, they're sort of drill grids. They tested 8 targets and made 5 porphyry copper gold discoveries. So I've never seen anywhere in the world such a strong conversion rate of target to discovery. So there's something pretty special about this bit of the crust that we're excited about. Zooming in, there's a mag map of those porphyry systems. As I mentioned, we put out some drill results yesterday. We put out some others early last week. We've got 2 key deposits there, the Deerhorn deposit. Deerhorn actually has 33 million tonnes at 0.7% copper in the resource base there, and there's some really high-grade hits. Yesterday from that southeast deposit, starting at 60 metres, we put out a drill result of 95 metres at 1.1% copper equivalent. So there's something going on here. There's certainly higher grade, and within that bigger lower grade 0.4% copper resource, some really high-grade numbers. So what we're looking a little bit differently is we've brought on some very good people, including Dr. Chris Leslie, who was the discoverer of the Blackwater deposit, one of BC's leading porphyry specialists, looking at understanding those high-grade zones within that project. And so we're at that at the moment. I think we've engaged Ausenco to do some internal scoping work, and I think we will find that in the next year or two we'll have a project that we're doing a PEA on a much higher grade core to all of that fantastic Woodjam mineralisation that we've got. And apart from that, we've got 5 other screaming targets that look like they're a strong chance of delivering us a porphyry copper discovery. Just lastly, the Poplar project, which we acquired, that's up near the town of Houston, not far off the major north-south highway in British Columbia. We sit just north of the Huckleberry mine. We're all major shareholders in Inventor Capital of Surge Copper, which Surge owns the Berg and Burgett, so we know that this area has tremendous porphyry potential. The Poplar deposit was discovered in 1975 by Utah Copper. They spent about $50 million in today's dollars drilling that deposit out and then failed to do any other exploration work around that on that property. We went out there a month ago after the acquisition was completed, 2 months ago, back in May. We headed down to the southern area. We found that there are a number of shallow 100 feet deep vertical drill holes, poorly logged, and looked at that, and we came up with some interesting results. But the really fascinating thing is that where you see that conductivity and mag image, that big pink blob, there's a 10-kilometre zone of very intense alteration moving from phyllic to potassic alteration at the centre of the core. You've got we've just completed, I don't think we've released the results, but it's not market sensitive, so we can talk about it, some really juicy soil geochem across it with a classic zinc halo around a copper, gold and moly centre to that anomaly. And in the guts of that you see a mag donut style anomaly that potentially relates to the magnetite destruction at the centre of a porphyry core. So that dot in the middle of that, where that drill hole labelled P9505 is one of the best porphyry targets I've ever seen, where every single vector says drill here. We're just in the process of completing an IP survey, and that's looking really interesting for us. So we'll be drilling that at some point in the next 6 to 12 months, and I would expect announcing a porphyry discovery not far after that. A little bit about the corporate summary. We've got 227 million shares out. We've got 4 million in the bank today. We completed a financing back in June, bringing in $5.5 million. My partners and I support these financings very heavily. I've put $1.5 million into the company so far at a price of closer to 25 cents. We've been beaten up by the market thoroughly despite good results in recent times, trading at a market cap of about $15 million. I've put about $1.5 million of mine and my family's money into the company so far. The company won't go broke because we continue to write cheques ourselves and believe in what we've got here. And that's the situation. The things to take away from this: we've got a huge resource base, 4 billion pounds of copper, nearly 2 million ounces of gold in the ground at great grade already. Fantastic location in the province of British Columbia where you can get things done and get projects permitted. And very importantly, we've got 5 extraordinary drill targets that we'll be testing over the next 12 to 18 months. So a heck of a lot of upside there. And if you're buying today, you're buying at a $15 million valuation, which is incredibly cheap for what we have. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Craig. Yep.